We now have Naya's skull, and Naya has a complete skull. And from that complete skull, we are going to reconstruct her face.
Skeletons don't lie. And in Mexico's hidden caves, one of them just rewrote the story of the Americas.
There's this human skull.
This site was never touched since 13 to 12,000 years ago.
From a teenage girl trapped in a lightless abyss to extinct megafauna guarding her bones, this ancient burial holds secrets science barely believed possible.
This Naya is the oldest one, the most complete skeleton, genetically complete as well, that has allowed us to prove that.
But when researchers cracked her DNA and saw where she came from, let's just say, you'll never look at early American history the same again.
What's really unique about being able to determine something about her DNA is it's a direct link, it's a genetic link to other Native American populations, both prehistoric and contemporary populations.
The find, a skeleton at the bottom of the black hole. Back in 2007, a team of expert divers slipped through the submerged veins of the Sacactun cave system in Mexico's Yucatan. They were just mapping tunnels until they hit a drop so dark, so deep, they named it Hoyo Negro, or Black Hole. Hovering over the edge was like staring into a sunken galaxy. But what they found down there? That changed everything. Resting 130 feet below sea level was a teenage girl. Her skeleton lay among Ice Age giants, perfectly preserved, almost frozen in time. They later named her Naya, a nod to the mythic water nymphs. But this wasn't mythology. This was real. Her body was nearly whole. 98 bones, 30 teeth, a full skull, full arms, a leg, even a pelvis. In archaeological terms, that's gold. That's never. She stood about 5 feet tall and died at just 15 or 16. Her bones told a brutal story. A spiral fracture in her forearm, likely from a twist-pull injury that had healed. A fresh break in the pelvis? That's what likely ended her life. Some experts even think she had already given birth. A young Ice Age mother, dead and forgotten in the dark. But it's not just the body. It's the place. That chamber can't be reached without tech-heavy rebreathers. Even now, it's a nightmare to access. The divers had to digitally map the whole thing using three-dimensional photogrammetry, like building a virtual fossil time capsule so no one would disturb the fragile layers below. And yet, for all the silence down there, Naya still had something to say. Because when scientists drilled into one of her teeth, it wasn't just bones they found. It was ancient DNA. And what that DNA revealed next? That's where the real twist begins. The genetic result, a 12,000-year-old voice speaks. You wouldn't expect DNA to survive in a humid Mexican cave for over 12,000 years. But Naya's molar held on. When researchers extracted and sequenced the ancient material, what they uncovered wasn't just a trace, it was a direct link. Her mitochondrial DNA belonged to haplogroup D1, a lineage traced back to Beringia, and still found today among indigenous peoples across both North and South America. In fact, D1 makes up around 10% of all Native American maternal lines, spiking as high as 29% in areas like Chile and Argentina. That's a massive footprint, far from where Naya was discovered. What made this even more of a shock? Before Naya, no ancient DNA this old had ever been recovered from so far southeast. She was over 4,000 kilometers away from any previous pre-10,000-year samples. Her existence literally redrew the map of early American ancestry. The team didn't take shortcuts either. They applied every ancient DNA tool in the kit: restriction assays, Sanger sequencing, and high-resolution Illumina reads. Multiple tests, multiple labs, same result, haplogroup D1. And when critics questioned the data, the team didn't flinch. They opened it to public databases, letting other scientists challenge or confirm it. And guess what? They did. Here's a fun twist. Mitochondrial DNA only tracks the maternal line. That means if your grandmother carried D1, so do you. So Naya, she's not just a data point. She's a thread in a living lineage. But there's one more detail that turns all of this upside down. And it's not in the genes. It's in the skull. Because Naya looked nothing like what most people expect. And yet, she's genetically exactly who we thought. The skull that didn't fit until it did. For decades, early American skeletons told a strange story, at least to the naked eye. The skulls didn't match modern expectations, long and narrow, with features that seemed closer to Polynesian or Australo-Melanesian populations than to today's indigenous peoples. That visual mismatch launched a storm of theories. Some claimed there had been 2 waves of migration. Others pointed fingers at Europe, pushing the so-called Solutrean hypothesis, which suggested Ice Age Europeans crossed the Atlantic. But Naya? She flipped the script. Here was a girl with that same Paleo-American skull shape, and yet her DNA wasn't European or exotic. It was D1. A direct maternal link to Native Americans today. That single fact wrecked the idea that different skulls must mean different origins. Instead, it proved something far simpler. Bone shapes evolve. Diet, isolation, genetic drift, those things reshape faces over time. More studies backed it up. Crania from South America showed variation, but variation that fit within normal evolutionary paths, not some wild lost tribe from Europe. When genetics and morphology clashed, it wasn't the DNA that cracked, it was the assumptions. Even the Solutrean argument, already shaky, took another hit. The tools? Not actually identical. The timelines? Way off. And the genetics? No Ice Age European DNA has ever turned up in ancient American remains. That's why most experts call it what it is: fringe speculation dressed up like science. So here's the new bottom line. The skull may look different, but the bloodline is the same. The Clovis child, a second voice, confirms the line. Travel northeast from Naya's resting place up to Montana, and the story continues, this time with a child. In a shallow sandstone alcove near Wilsall, a young boy was laid to rest nearly 12,700 years ago. His body was surrounded by over 100 handcrafted tools, all dusted in red ochre. A burial ritual seen across both Ice Age Eurasia and the early Americas. That site became known as Anzic. And just like Naya, the boy now called Anzic I held a secret locked in his bones. When his full genome was sequenced, it delivered a powerful message. He wasn't just similar to Native Americans, he was part of the same extended family. His mitochondrial DNA was D4H3A, and his Y chromosome belonged to QL54, a paternal line still common among indigenous men today. Even more surprising, his genes showed a stronger connection to Central and South American groups than to some northern ones. That meant diversity was already present within the Americas at that time. These weren't just new arrivals. Lineages were branching, mixing, and spreading in every direction. And just like with Naya, there was a deep Siberian signal in his genome. That Malta ancestry, tied to ancient populations in what is now Russia, proved the mixing happened before the Americas were settled. After all the data was in, something rare happened in science: closure. The bones were returned, and in June of 2014, tribal leaders and scientists came together to rebury Anzic I near his original resting place. It was a ceremony of respect, honoring both tradition and truth. Naya told part of the story. Anzac 1 confirmed it. But how did their ancestors get here so fast? And from where? The Migration Puzzle. A frozen pause and a kelp-lined highway. So how did Naya and Anzac 1 end up so far apart, thousands of kilometers from each other, yet share deep ancestral roots? The answer takes us back to Beringia, that vast stretch of land, now mostly swallowed by the sea, once connected Siberia and Alaska. Genetic clues suggest the ancestors of Native Americans didn't rush through it. Instead, they paused for thousands of years. It's what scientists call the Beringian standstill. During this isolation, key founder lineages like A2, B2, C1, D1, and X2A formed and stabilized. Then, everything changed. A warming world started to melt glaciers, open corridors, and raise sea levels. And when the time was right, these people moved. Fast. Here's where it gets wild. The traditional idea of a clean inland route through an ice-free corridor just doesn't line up. The corridor likely didn't become biologically viable until after 12,600 years ago, too late for the earliest southbound migrations. So researchers turned west, to the sea. Along the Pacific Rim stretched what's now known as the Kelp Highway. Rich coastal ecosystems teeming with shellfish, kelp, salmon, and game. Perfect for small, boat-savvy communities. This pathway could have helped early humans hug the shoreline, island hopping down into the Americas well before the inland corridor opened. It explains why early coastal sites are rare. Many are now underwater. And that shift changes the picture. These weren't just hunters chasing mammoths. They were shoreline travelers, reading tides, navigating coves, and surviving off ocean life. Ancient genomes prove it. A rapid spread, followed by region changes over time. The diversity seen in places like Yucatan and Montana? It all tracks. But there's one place in Mexico that claims to be even older than them all. The dates are shocking. The evidence? Well, that's where it gets messy. Chiquihuite Cave, the site that split the field. High in Mexico's Astillero Mountains sits Chiquihuite Cave, a place that lit up headlines in 2020 with claims that rewrote the timeline of human presence in the Americas. The team behind the excavation reported thousands of green and black stone flakes from deep sediment layers, with dating results that reached back as far as 33 to 31,000 years ago. If true, that would double the timeline of human settlement in the region. And that's exactly what sparked the storm. The tools, if they are tools, make up over 90% of the finds, and the greenish stone, not local. Some researchers argue that means intentional transport or aesthetic selection. Combined with dozens of radiocarbon and luminescence dates, the case looked strong. But others weren't convinced. A large consortium of critics pushed back hard. They analyzed the stone fractures and argued many of the so-called artifacts were actually geofacts, naturally broken limestone chunks created by slope movement inside the cave. Add to that the absence of hearths, butchered bones, or storage pits, and their verdict was cautious, not proven. And there's another problem. While the team recovered plenty of sediment DNA, plants, animals, the full cave ecosystem, no human DNA was found. Without bones or unequivocal signs of human presence, skeptics say the burden of proof hasn't been met. On social media, the cave exploded into myth. Some claimed it proved old world migrations or lost tribes in Mexico. Others saw it as validation of fringe timelines. But the truth? It's unresolved. What's still missing? The hunt for nuclear DNA. Naya's mitochondrial DNA, passed down only through mothers, told one side of the story. But to understand who she really was, and how she fit into the full family tree of early Americans, scientists need something deeper: nuclear DNA. Unlike mitochondrial DNA, nuclear DNA comes from both parents. It reveals whether Naya belonged to the northern or southern Native American branches, if there was any sex-biased migration, or whether gene flow shaped early groups in ways we've barely begun to explore. It could even answer long-standing questions, like whether ancient populations in Mexico ever showed those faint, debated Australasian-like signals seen in some Amazonian genomes. Right now, we don't know, because no nuclear DNA has yet been recovered from any Pleistocene-era human remains in Mexico. Not from Naya, not from anyone, but that may be about to change. Researchers now target dense bone structures like the petrous portion of the inner ear, which can hold up to 100 times more usable DNA than regular bone. They also use minimally destructive cementum sampling from tooth roots, preserving the appearance of ancient specimens while still pulling powerful genetic data. Paired with single-stranded library prep designed for damaged fragments, the chances of success are rising, fast. And there's momentum. In 2023 and 2024, scientists sequenced dozens of pre-Hispanic genomes from younger remains in Mexico, showing sacrifice patterns, climate resilience, and even genetic continuity between ancient communities and people living there today. But those finds are 10,000 years too late to settle the first arrival debate. The Others in the Dark, Tulum's hidden cast of Ice Age lives. Naya wasn't alone down there. Beneath the limestone corridors of the Yucatan are multiple Ice Age individuals, preserved against all odds in the tropics, where time usually erases everything. One of the oldest, Eva de Najaron, dated to around 13,600 years ago. Her remains were found more than 350 meters deep inside a now submerged tunnel. That depth alone says something. She didn't stumble in. She entered intentionally. Then there's La Mujer de las Palmas, dated to roughly 10,000 years ago. She's famous not just for her age, but for her face. A lifelike facial reconstruction brought her back into the public eye, reminding us these weren't abstract ancestors. These were real people with expressions, injuries, and histories etched into their bones. And the most chilling? Chan Hole 3. Discovered in 2016, more than a kilometer from the cave's mouth and 8 meters underwater, she was about 30 when she died. The setting feels deliberate, her skull and torso arranged near a flat limestone slab that might have been used as a headrest. Not quite a burial, but not random either. Her skeleton reads like a medical file: 3 healed skull injuries, possible signs of infection, and a distinct cranial shape, mesocranial, shared by other Tulum finds. It's a local pattern, but for now, without genome-wide DNA, it tells us more about bone than ancestry. And get this, Chan Hole 2, another individual nearby, was looted, stolen by divers before researchers could even study it. That's how fragile this record is. The miners beneath the earth, America's oldest underground industry. In the same pitch-black tunnels that held Ice Age skeletons, researchers uncovered something even more unexpected: mines. Not modern operations. We're talking deliberate, organized excavation done by Paleo-Indians between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago, deep inside what's now the Sagittario cave system. In 2020, a team mapped out chambers like La Mina, and what they found erased any doubt. Ochre pits carved straight into the cave floor, broken stalagmites reworked into hammers, cairns stacked like trail signs, piles of excavated spoil, even torches made from resin-rich wood, their charcoal still resting where they were last burned. These weren't accidental deaths or ceremonial spots. These were purpose-built work zones, designed and lit for mining before the cave ever flooded. And documenting it? A marathon. Over 600 hours underwater, tens of thousands of photos, and full three-dimensional reconstructions of the tunnels so scientists could study every detail without ever kicking up the fragile sediment. But the question is why? Why risk life and breath in the dark for red powder? Because ochre wasn't just decoration, it was survival tech. A Swiss Army pigment. Indigenous use of ochre spans everything from hide preservation and adhesives to sunscreen, wound care, insect repellent, and sacred body paint. And these miners weren't digging for scraps. They targeted high-purity hematite deposits that produced a rich, buttery pigment used across continents. That changes the narrative. These early Americans weren't just wandering the wilderness. They were engineers of the underground, returning again and again to harvest color from the Earth's veins. When the sky fell, the impact that set the stage. Before Naya, before Chan Hol, before the miners ever stepped into the darkness, something far older carved the path beneath their feet. Roughly 66 million years ago, an asteroid slammed into what is now northern Yucatan, leaving behind a scar 180 kilometers wide. Scientists call it Chicxulub. That impact ended the age of dinosaurs, but it also did something else. It shattered the limestone crust, cracked open deep fractures, and planted the seeds of an entirely new ecosystem, one built around cenotes. Today, those cenotes trace a massive ring that follows the buried edge of the crater's inner rim. You can spot the arc from satellite imagery. The Ring of Cenotes, a dotted circle of sinkholes outlining the ghost of that ancient strike. But these aren't just pretty blue holes. They're fractures turned lifelines. Rainwater filtered through them, dissolved rock, and collapsed roofs, creating natural wells across a dry peninsula almost entirely lacking rivers. Fast forward to the Ice Age, and these sinkholes became magnets for animals, for humans, and for history. And here's the kicker. Even though Hoyo Negro lies east of Chicxulub's rim, it taps into the same aquifer, shaped by the same post-impact geology. Those vast, water-filled tunnels that explorers now dive? They trace the fracture lines seeded by the blast that ended the dinosaurs. In 2018, divers connected Sac Actun and Dos Ojos, briefly making it the longest underwater cave system ever recorded. The same cave network that once preserved ochre mines and Ice Age bodies also stores the shockwave of an extinction event. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments. Do you think the next game-changing discovery is already sitting in a museum drawer somewhere?